It is not unusual for the book was much better than the movie conversation to take place, even if we talk about highly praised movies like It Chapter 1 and 2. So, let us look at the top 5 differences between the book and the movie and talk about why they were made. Especially the last one is understandable. It would have been crazy to put this into the movie. Number 5. The difference in time. The first difference that definitely doesn't go unnoticed is the different time period that the movie is set in. In the book, Stephen King uses the 1980s, with flashbacks to the late 1950s for the childhood of the characters, whereas the movie uses the 80s as the setting for their childhood and the present time for their adulthood. The movie, perhaps, wanted to bank on the nostalgia associated with the 80s, growing up during that period with Street Fighter and Batman, riding bikes through sunny neighborhoods, as opposed to the 50s when The Mummy and I Was a Teenage Werewolf were a large part of pop culture. So it's safe to say relatability is the primary reason for this particular reference, and it is an important one for any director who cares about establishing an audience connection. Number 4. Georgie's corpse. While the first scene of the movie depicts the scarring exchange between Georgie and the clown, just the way it has been described in the book, there's a complete mismatch in the way the aftermath is shown. For one, in the movie, the neighbor doesn't really have a presence. The opening scene merely shows Georgie talking to the drain, and the blood left after what Bill thinks is a disappearance. He assumes his brother is alive, but in the sewers, and might wash up at some point. However, this is not the case in the book. There, it is handled differently as Georgie's body is found and recovered, making the murder quite apparent. Not just that, the murder is also noticed by a neighbor who happened to be out gardening on that fateful day. The only reason this could have been done was to increase the suspense surrounding Georgie's death, adding to the buildup of the movie and giving it a more intense momentum. Number 3. Different avatars of Pennywise. Perhaps one of the most visually interesting aspects of it is Pennywise's ability to transform into the character that would inspire the most fear in the children. With the kids in the novel growing up during the 50s and with the movies that we talked about during the difference in time period, Pennywise takes the shape of some of the most iconic movie monsters at that time, including the Mummy, the Wolfman, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. While it might have been entertaining to see Pennywise take on some iconic monsters from the 1980s, we have to remember that what is considered scary changes over time, and again, for the sake of relatability, or rather to make sure the audience find it scary, creatures such as zombies were used. Only Eddie's oozing leper actually makes it to the big screen. Bill, of course, is haunted by his missing brother, but Mike doesn't see a giant bird like in the book, and neither does Stan see drowned children. Richie's werewolf is a miss, but the film does update Beverly's iconic scene with the bloody sink, making it even more sinister, and is definitely one of the best from the film. Number 2. No depiction of racism. Mike Hanlon is the lone black person in the friend group and an indispensable part of the book as his backstory gives him much character. He's also the only character who narrates the story in first person during some parts of the literary incarnation. While the backstory, his rich relationship with his father, and his stable home environment aren't given much of a place in the adaptation, the blatant racism that he faces in the book is also not depicted. The reason behind this can be accredited to the time period. While the 80s were definitely nowhere near a post-racial utopia, overt expressions of racism and the use of racial slurs such as been written in the book were seriously frowned upon and avoided. King's use of it is justified since his writing is set in the 50s, so in a sense, this difference is understandable. Number 1. The controversial sex scene. One of the most scandalous scenes in the novel takes place right after the group of friends defeat Pennywise as children. The kids begin to fight and grow apart after this traumatic episode and lose their way in the sewers. As a way to bring them back together, given how the book consistently stresses on the importance of unity amongst the 7, Beverly takes off her clothes and offers herself to the group. It's obviously uncalled for and a super inappropriate scene, the impact of which the writer did not anticipate himself. I wasn't really thinking of the sexual aspect of it, King conveyed via a message board on his website. Intuitively, the losers knew they had to be together again. The sexual act connected childhood and adulthood. Regardless, it's a scene that didn't make the cut for reasons that escapes no one, and the director, Andy Muschietti, told Collider why it wasn't required. In the end, the replacement for it is the scene with the blood oath, where everyone sort of says goodbye, Muschietti said. Spoiler, the blood oath scene is there, and it's the last time they see each other as a group. It's unspoken. So there, now you know. So that was all the important differences between It the movie and It the book. For more of this content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon for notifications. Stay tuned and stay safe, I'll be back with more soon.